football, it seems, is not coming home. It's going either to France or Croatia. Fortunately for you, we are not.
This is Partners in Crime with Adam Croft and Robert Dawes.
What a disappointing night on Wednesday, Bob.
Well, yes, and as you say, fortunately, we're still here in Bedfordshire. Well, unfortunately, depending on where you are. I mean, there we are. We're not talking football. We said we wouldn't talk football on this podcast.
I mean, we are, after all, a football podcast which occasionally has crime fiction interviews on it.
Oh, God, no, you don't.
I probably should explain the football's not coming home joke for people who either aren't into football or aren't in the UK, because that's probably not. But was it? I think it was Euro '96, wasn't it? 22 years ago.
Yes.
Two British comedians and a band released a football single for that tournament.
Can you remember who the comedians were?
David Baddiel and Frank Skinner.
And Frank Skinner.
Yes.
That was
that chap off the Lightning Seeds, Ian, what's his name as well?
The famous Ian, what's his name?
Famous Ian,
yes,
what's his name? Yes, and that was the refrain from the song was "Football's coming home," which I think was a reference to the fact that it was held in England, and that having invented the game, we were hosting a tournament there for the first time in 30 years.
Well, I'm not going to miss listening to another refrain of that particular song.
I don't want to hear it anymore.
It has to be said, but everyone's been going on about it and to say, oh, how disappointing or whatever. But I look at it from the other point of view. I think we did extraordinarily well. It's a young team that will be back in 4 years' time, hopefully
back in 2 years' time for the Euros.
Oh, back in 2 years' time.
They're only going to get better. They're so young. They're only going to get better.
And some of them may actually, in their spare time, be very talented crime fiction writers.
Yes, or maybe they listen to this.
Or maybe they even... That would be great, wouldn't it?
If you're listening to this and you play for England, do get in touch. Highly unlikely, I think.
Okay. Just say, hi, Harry, hope you're well, and thanks for listening.
Thanks for the memories, Harry. So I'll be honest with you, I've spent absolutely no time reading or watching crime fiction this week. I've had so much going on. That's for another show altogether. But you have.
Well, yes, I have. There's a brand new television series out, and it's called Sharp Objects. Now, that may ring a bell for many of you, because it is, of course, a novel by the hugely talented Gillian Gone Girl Flynn, and that's come out this week. I've seen the first one, and it is absolutely splendid. But of course, it was a book first. So yes, what's it about? Well, when two girls, aged 9 and 10, are abducted and killed in Wind Gap, Missouri, Camille Preaker is sent back to her hometown to investigate and report on the crimes. Camille, self-described white trash from old money, is the daughter of one of the richest families in town. Long haunted by a childhood tragedy and estranged from her mother for years, Camille suddenly finds herself installed once again in her family's Victorian mansion, reacquainting herself with her distant mother and half-sister she barely knows, a precocious 13-year-old who holds a disquieting grip on the town and surrounds herself with a group of vampish teenage girls. Now, as she struggles to remain detached from the evidence, her relationship with her neurotic, hypochondriac mother threatens to topple her hard-won mental stability. Working alongside the police chief and a special agent from out of town, Camille tries to uncover the mystery of who killed these little girls and why. So that was the blurb for the book, which I haven't read, I have to say, but obviously it's by Gillian Flynn, so many thousands of you probably have already read it. So why
is that a series?
Or
is it a film?
That was a book, but this is a series,
right,
starring Amy Adams. Lucy Mangan in The Guardian, a wonderful writer, reviews it by saying, "Are you in the mood for voluntarily admitting more darkness into your life?"
Yes.
That is the question. I do understand if you're not, but if you are, or even if you are vacillating, Sharp Objects should be your very first choice. Adapted from Gillian Gone Girl Flynn's twisted debut novel by Marty Noxon, and directed by Jean-Marc Vallée, who gave one of my favourite series of last year, Big Little Lies, all its beauty and much of its talk, and starring multiple Oscar nominee Amy Adams. It is a pedigree production that manages even more than the sum of its parts. Well, the first episode episode is absolutely terrific, draws you in to this small town in Missouri. I mean, the small town element of crime novels we've talked about often. You know, it's a staple of a lot of Scandinavian crime noir books. You know, the copper comes into the distant town.
It's the secrets, isn't it? And it's the people keeping stuff to themselves because they know the people involved, and it's, you know, I think actually it's an offshoot of the golden age thing, really, where somebody would go into an old country house, for example, and it was a big family, or, you know, people who worked for them, the gardener, the housekeeper, and, you know, people had these loyalties and these connections, and they wouldn't talk, and, you know, things had to be unravelled and uncovered in a different way. I think that's a modern version of that. You know, not many of us have big country houses, you know, you accepted, Bob, and we don't have housekeepers and gardeners, so this is the modern take on it, I think.
I've got 3 gardeners, for goodness sake. But that's true. You see, one of my favourite films, I don't know whether I mentioned this in previous podcasts, is not a crime fiction film. It's called A Bad Day at Black Rock, and it stars the wonderful Spencer Tracy. And he's just a stranger, and a train comes into town, and you can see the train track going across this huge expanse of land for hundreds of miles, and there's this little town, and the train stops, and one passenger gets off in a black suit and a hat and a suitcase, and it's Spencer Tracy, and he walks into town.
Wasn't he one of the Thunderbirds?
That's Mr. Tracy, and Thunderbirds are go. No, this is very different. Anyway, he walks into town in exactly the same scenario. By just asking questions, he's come on a mission to find some information, and the whole town just sort of, you know, it falls to pieces. Anyway,
it was a bit kind of Wicker Man in that sense, is it?
Yes. So I mean, these are archetypal tropes and structures that all writers fall back on or reinvent, as is more often the case, I guess. And again, this is what this series seems to be doing. You know, it could be a Western by any other name. Gary Cooper walks into town and becomes a new marshal and decides to do...
One of the best books I've read, actually, the last couple of years was Solomon Creed by Simon Toyne, and that is a similar kind of thing. You know, this mysterious person walks into town and all hell breaks loose. So that's a cracking book.
Well, that's very good. And a point of interest, coming from the Bedfordshire area, Gary Cooper, the great Hollywood film star...
Dunstable's second most famous son.
Dunstable's second most famous son. I mean, who knew? There's a pub named after him in Dunstable. Anyway, there we are. That will go down very well if you're listening in Slovakia or Tobago. A little bit, but anyway, Lucy Mangum continues to say that Sharp Objects is altogether mean, moody and magnificent, and a fine addition to the gathering tide of female-led and female-driven dramas. Sharp Objects is part of a new breed of slickly produced but weighty vehicles for brilliant actors of beyond starlet age to explore multiple plot strands, women's stories and contemporary issues. And it also has one of my all-time favourite actresses. I mean, Amy Adams is absolutely terrific, but Patricia Clarkson plays the mother, and she is... Talk about a class act. She is absolutely wonderful. So that's my recommendation.
And how do we watch that? Where's that on?
That is a very good question. Here it is. I've made a note of it. It's on the telly.
Oh, right.
I do you know what? I don't know. I forgot what I should know this. I can't armed with facts. I think it's probably Sky.
Right.
I won't be probably Sky Atlantic. They seem to do most of those. The BBC tend to do the Scandinavian and French noir.
Well, I'm looking here. It's HBO originally in the States.
Yes, they made it. Yeah, so
it probably would be a Sky Atlantic job then.
I would have thought so, but you'll find it, listeners.
We have a lot of listeners in the States, of course. Almost half of them. So,
well, I mean,
HBO is
and
the place to
they're
go.
making the most fantastic drama over there, and this is one of them. So thank you very much. We're looking forward to it.
Yeah, well, I should point out at this moment in time, as I tend to about 10 minutes into the podcast,
yes,
that we are gratefully sponsored by Kobo. And if you hear of a book that tickles your fancy at any point, why not go for that one, actually? Sharp Objects by Gillian Flynn. Or wait until you hear our guest interview today, because I think there'll be a few more you'll want to pick up.
Absolutely.
But head over to kobo.com, find the book you want, and if you enter the promo code CRIME, all in capital letters, at the checkout, you get a remarkable 90% off of your first ebook purchase with Kobo. That's a very, very kind offer from them. And that's only for listeners to Partners in Crime. Don't do the whistle.
I'm not going to. That's what's the final score whistle?
That was similar. That sounded more like one man and his dog.
Yeah.
So
Ship, wait, ship. Come here, boy.
Before we go too far off piece, shall we do an interview?
Yeah.
Rachel Amphlett is the author of 16 crime and thriller novels, including the Detective K. Hunter crime thrillers and the Dan Taylor espionage thrillers. Her books have been translated into numerous foreign languages and continue to sell in huge numbers across the world. And she is now, quite literally across the world, speaking to us from her home near Brisbane. Hello, Rachel.
Hello, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Now, you're based in Brisbane, but you're not originally from Brisbane, as the more eagle-eared listeners may have noticed from your hello there.
That's right. Originally, I grew up in Berkshire. Spent 7 years playing in bands around Oxfordshire because I was determined not to get a proper job. And ended up in Kent for a few years before emigrating over here 13 years ago.
Wow. And what took you to Australia in the first place?
I was backpacking over here in my 20s. I blame my dad. He took us to see Crocodile Dundee when I was 15 years old. And then I was absolutely determined that I was going to go and see this mad country and all the colours and the animals and things like that. And I spent a month backpacking up the East Coast. Got back, actually about 4 or 5 weeks later, and broke my dad's heart by turning around and saying to him, I'm going back to live. And it took me a couple of years, but then I did it. Yeah, we've been here 13 years now.
Wow. But your books still have an undeniably British feel. I mean, the Detective K. Hunter series is set in Kent. And the Dan Taylor series, I think you go a little wider with that, don't you?
Oh, yes.
That's international, but he's definitely your British spy hero, as it were. And I think that's because it's where, that's where my roots are. That's what I know. And with the Detective K. Hunter series, I know Maidstone really well because that was the last place in England that I lived before moving over here. And it has such a great setting for a series like that.
I mean, what? So the Dan Taylor series you started writing first, didn't you?
Yeah.
And the K. Hunter series has come in since. I mean, what kind of took you away from some espionage and towards the more police procedural style of crime thrillers?
I first dabbled my hand in what I would say, pure crime fiction, not spy thrillers, with Standalone at the beginning of 2015, Look Closer. And I really enjoyed that story because although the detective wasn't the main protagonist, I liked the crime fiction undertones of the story. I had a museum curator that just got caught up in events beyond his control with a detective tracking his every movement. But I think that gave me the confidence. I've always loved police procedurals, reading them, and obviously TV series and that, but I don't think I had the confidence to tackle one, which sounds really bizarre because there's so much research involved in writing spy thrillers. And I had book 4 in that Dan Taylor series come out in May 2016. I literally published it the day before getting on a plane for Crime Fest. And I'd already started getting this idea for a new detective series going around in my head. And you know what it's like when you've got an idea going around in your head and a new character that's shouting to be heard, you ignore them at your peril. And when I got back from Crime Fest in 2016, I started writing what was to become the first book in that series, Scared to Death. And I haven't looked back since.
Wow. Tell us a little bit about K. Hunter. She's not your typical kind of troubled anti-hero police officer, is she? She's a little more level-headed than that.
Yeah, I think it's... I did a lot of studying. I read a lot of interviews with a lot of my crime writing heroes, such as Peter James, Ian Rankin, Peter Robinson, Anne Cleves, you name it. I read the interviews and just tried to up the ante on my craft, but also to make sure that I understood all the tropes in the police procedurals. And I wanted to do something different as well because there are people doing the troubled detective much better than I could. And I just wanted to put my own twist on the tale. And that's why I decided that, she wasn't going to be an alcoholic, divorced, mother of 3 kids hanging around her ankles sort of thing. But she has quite a balanced home life, which I think is nice. You sort of have the light and the dark. Some very dark crimes there. So to have the lightness and just a bit of a breath of fresh air for readers during the stories, to just take them out of all the dark things that I'm showing them.
So it's not all misery in the world of Kay Hunter, then?
No, it's not. And I think my dad was a leading ambulance officer for 27 years when I was growing up. And I've got friends in the police service over there, and obviously spoken to a lot of detectives while researching the series. And for me, it was equally important to show that they work as a team. There's no lone wolf, and they all have a very, very dry sense of humour. And I tried to capture all that as well, because some of the conversations I used to hear my dad and his colleagues having, are not repeatable. But it's how they deal with the job they're doing.
And the most recent book in the Kay Hunter series is out, Gone to Ground.
Yes, that came out on the 8th of July.
Excellent. Tell us a bit about that.
It was kind of nice for this one because it works really well as a standalone. The last book that came out in March, Call to Arms, took me by surprise. That opened up the Kay Hunter world to a lot of new readers that hadn't discovered the series from the first book. And I think I'm hoping the same may happen with Gone to Ground. Essentially, I've gone back to a serial killer thriller because I haven't done one for a while. And the idea for this was going around my head from the last time I visited Kent 2 years ago. We were walking through the woods at the Pilgrim's Way, and this rather ghost-like figure started walking towards us from some smoke-filled clearing in the woods. And it was quite spooky, and that scene really stayed with me, and I've actually used it in this book. It inspired the whole story.
What was that then?
I can't say without giving away what the twist in it, so you'll have to read it.
Oh, you've done this before, haven't you?
Yeah. Well, essentially, the opening scene of the book is a group of cyclists are out on a Sunday morning in the Kentish summer countryside, and one of them has a puncture. They pull over to a lay-by and they discover a severed foot in a work boot. And that was always inspired that you always see a single work boot on the side of the road. You never see a pair. And my overactive imagination started going, well, what if there was a foot in there?
Yes.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's true. It is scary to find one boot, and it's scarier to find that than a dead body, almost, isn't it? Was it Alfred Hitchcock said something along those lines? It's not the blast that's scary; it's the anticipation of it, or something along those lines. And,
well, we now know why we only find one, because obviously the other foot hops away. So I mean, it's a fantastic. I mean, if that's the opening for the book, that's absolutely brilliant. I mean, I have read two years ago. I had the great pleasure of reading your first Dan Taylor novel, White Gold.
Oh, wow! Thank you.
I thought was absolutely smashing, and for lovers of espionage and whatever, with a great conceit. An alternative energy supply being discovered, and the effect it has on big conglomerates. And Dan Taylor's in the middle of this, trying to sort it all out. So I mean, I thought that was a great read, and I was through that in a day and a half, I think. So, are you going to be writing any more Dan Taylor?
I'd love to. I actually, I've been packing up, because we're emigrating back to the UK in a few weeks. I've actually been packing up all my notebooks because I'm going to post them. I don't want them to go on the container on the ship because they're all my original ideas in there. And there is an idea sketched out for a fifth Dan Taylor. It's just finding time and finding the time to do the research, because I'm a fact junkie. I write fiction, but I try and write fiction so close to the facts that it makes you think, what if?
Yes.
Well, it's a huge compliment coming from Bob that he read your book in a day and a half, because
away here.
Well, I mean, a day and a half. It takes him that long to get dressed sometimes. to get through a book in that time.
I'm a very careful dresser.
Well, it's like trying to hold a book where you're getting your hand down a sleeve. It's quite difficult.
Do you know? I think, may I say, I think you've got one of the best websites I've seen, and really detailed. And for those,
thanks very much.
Not at all. I mean, it's really, really great. And you talk about time. Obviously, you've got a very busy period coming up, not just writing, but with life in general. But this is something as you do so much of the work yourself. You know, you're sort of marketing, you're writing, obviously, you're communicating with all your readers and new people who have just sort of got into your books. I mean, that takes up a huge amount of your time. How do you divide your day between the actual writing and all the other challenges and jobs that you have to do as a writer these days?
I think for me, my dad always swore blind. I have the attention span of a gnat, so I have to be very careful and very disciplined. When I started writing, I was writing on my commute into Brisbane City every morning. I used to find a quiet seat on a train and open up the laptop and smash my daily word count before I got to work. And when I became a full-time writer last year, about a year ago now, I didn't want to lose that discipline. I'd heard so many horror stories about people going full-time as writers and then not producing anything because they found it too hard to adjust to that change in their life circumstances.
Yes.
So what I decided right from the start was that the moment I get in from walking the dog, I'm upstairs and I'm writing my minimum word count for the day. And that's whatever the production schedule is, work it into Scrivener, and that spits out the word count for the day. Once I've got that minimum word count, all bets are off. You know, I've been learning more about batching tasks. So I've been really good carving out time in my diary during the week, and I'll only look at emails for a couple of hours on certain days. I'll do other marketing stuff in batches and things like that. And I'm finding that discipline is really helping me. I go, it goes out the window some days, and especially over the next few weeks, it's not going to be good at all. But
well, I think we can forgive you that if you're moving halfway across the world.
Yeah, it's but even when I was travelling in the UK over May and June for Crime Fest and doing recce's for Where to Live, I maintained the discipline as much as I could. And I think it comes back to that saying that it takes 6 weeks to make a habit. It's like if you start a gym program, it takes you six weeks to get into that program for it to become second nature. And you just have to train your brain. It's only a muscle. And once you've got that discipline, it's a lot easier to hang on to it.
But because you do everything, and Adam does exactly the same, and the rewards for doing everything are great, but both of you are hugely successful. I mean, I don't do the same as Adam and you. I have a publisher because I couldn't do what you do. So I genuinely sit in awe of you guys and just say, my goodness me, you run your company, you run your ship, everything about it is down to you, and the rewards come back.
On the downside, we are slowly killing ourselves.
Well,
as we were just saying before we started recording, we both said we've really got to start looking after ourselves. But don't you find, Adam, for me, I love the business side as much as the writing stuff because I have a thirst for learning, and that's the bit I enjoy about it all.
And both sides kind of balance the other. Once you're absolutely sick of writing, you can go and get your spreadsheets out and you can do that side of things.
Yeah, you can be for a change, or go and play on Canva and create some images.
Exactly, yeah. And when you're bored of going through bank statements and everything else, you can balance that by going and getting creative and doing some writing. I think if I could only do one side of that, I think then I would get bored. I think it every day is slightly different because of that.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, I couldn't even begin to do it. I genuinely, I mean, I hit, sort of parts of the writing experience, and I go, what the hell do I do with this business side? I've got a Facebook out there. Should I do it or whatever? And Adam sorted it out in about 10 seconds, and it would take me all day, And it's quite extraordinary. But it is a part of the modern day writing. Whether you work with a publisher, or whether you have your own business, it is something that everyone is having to up their game on these days and take very seriously. seriously, you can't just sit at home, write the books and send them out there. You've got to actively pursue them. I mean, you've just travelled across the world to Crime Fest, and you're prepared to go wherever you may find your readers, and they meet them face to face. You engage them. Your website is full of fascinating, facts about you. I mean, you're great on moleskin notebooks. I mean, that's the most detailed thing I've ever seen. I want to buy one immediately. And great tips for people who want to read. But also, your readers get to know you much better. They get to know how you work, how your daily routine is, how you get these ideas literally onto paper or onto screen. And I just think that's absolutely fantastic. And I think people like you and Adam have really led the way in that.
Well, all authors have to do it now. It's not just, the indies now. All authors have to do it. I mean, even Peter James. He's probably the most valuable commodity for a publisher at the moment in terms of crime. There's nobody that any publisher would rather sign, and he still has to do not all the marketing himself. Though his publisher does a hell of a lot. But look at the amount that he does, and he gets out there and he leads it, and he's banging his own gong, and it makes him even more successful. You should see the smirk he gave me when I said banging his own gong there.
But don't you find as well, that's something I had to learn. When I started out, I tried to have a very strict division between writing Rachel and Rachel's home life. And now, I think probably in the last 18 months, I've learned to just let it go a little bit. I mean, for a start, Floyd, my dog, gets constantly more likes on Facebook than I ever will. I can bring a new book out and I get a few likes, put a picture of Floyd on there, I'm laughing. And also the most important thing that I think that I've learned in the last few years is to have a business and marketing plan. Before that, I was all over the place.
Well, that again comes back to what we've just been saying. A lot of writers wouldn't even begin to think like that. They write a book and they send it off. The very fact that you take responsibility for every aspect of the writer's profession and work experience is extraordinary. And that takes a lot of commitment. It takes a lot of study. But you've answered that already by just saying you just love detail, you love facts, and you love constantly learning new things. And I suppose in an ever exploding area of publishing these days, where new things are happening seemingly by the day, you have to surf that wave and keep on top of the board, and again, you do that superbly well.
No, thank you. Hope you continue to keep doing that because it changes so fast.
Well, yeah. I mean, you talk about a way you deal with things, again, with dictation, for instance. Simon Michael, who's an author that was on the show a couple of weeks ago, he uses that as well. He comes from a barrister. He was a barrister for 40 years, and he uses this dictation dragon, is it, to dictate, and because he's got a word count to hit, and he manages to use it. I mean, I couldn't even begin to understand how to do that, but you use that, and you find it a great tool for reaching your daily word count.
Yeah, it's great for first draft. It's lousy for editing, but for just smashing out the first draft, for the bulk of it, probably the first 45,000 words are dictated these days. And it's great because I've now got Bluetooth noise-cancelling headphones, and I've got a sit-stand desk. So I can just pace back and forth, dictating away, and it's like I'm getting my steps in as well.
Wow.
And so all this equipment is being packed away shortly, put on a plane or a boat, and brought back to Blighty.
That's right.
Oh, God, how exciting.
And the UK gains another superb crime writer.
Yes, good. Well, the fact is, in this very shrinking world, we never lost you, because we still have, we have your books. You can write wherever you. That's one of the things that's wonderful. I mean, you don't know whether you'll stay in England. You might go to Europe. You might go to America to live, or whatever. But you can write from anywhere.
It does sort of depend on what the first winter is like.
Oh, right. Well, yes. Well, we can't really talk about that because we've forgotten what that might be like. We've had such a wonderful... we love talking about the weather on this show. I don't know whether you've noticed, Rachel. We really do. It's true what they say about Brits.
It's very warm now. It's sitting here with all the windows shut and it's baking.
Yeah, it's we've had a summer through this last month of June. Whether it holds, I don't know. So I hope it's as good when you arrive as it is now.
So do I, because it was gorgeous. We only had about 3 or 4 days of rain while we were over in May and June. And there was part of me that wondered if it was lulling us into a false sense of security to make sure that we came back.
It's like that all the time here, Rachel. You know, what people say about the rain never happens. It's 30 degrees every day here.
So you've got...
What's that white stuff I saw?
So you've done espionage, you've got the K-Hunter detective series. Is there another series of books that you might be interested in writing at some point?
Funny you should say that, because I've actually got the first in series of a new police procedural series sat on my desk here that I'm trying to finish before we really start packing boxes.
Oh. Is this an exclusive scoop for Partners in Crime?
Well, there you go.
That's what we like.
That's something I've wanted to work on, but it's stories that don't fit into the K-Hunter world, but the stories are too good. I don't want to let them go. So I've got a new team I'm putting together, but that won't be seeing the light of day this year. There's another K-Hunter book I've really got to start working on towards the back end of this month. And I've got a passion project that I have been tapping away at for 3 years, which is more of a historical crime fiction that I really want to knuckle down and write next year. So it's at the moment I'm looking at production schedules and trying to work out how to juggle everything and not let something drop. At the same time progressing these projects, because Adam, you know what it's like. You have all these projects sitting around and you're itching to get your hands on them, but you've got the projects in your production schedule that you have to do first.
Yes, yeah, no, yeah. You've got to try and order things in a logical sequence, although the logic isn't always quite as obvious as it should be.
Yeah, I mean, it was really fun bringing out the Assassin series in quick succession in January. That there was a project that had been hanging around for a couple of years. And when I went full time, I was like, right, now's the time. I can finish this Assassin's trilogy, and I did. I'd like to write another one of those in the same form, you know, releasing an episode a week, as I did with those 3, because that was really good fun writing that.
All of your books do superbly well, particularly on Kobo as well, who of course are
Kobo
of ours.
Yeah, Kobo broke out my writing for me. I broke out on Kobo Canada before I did anywhere else in the world.
Yeah, they are excellent, and that's one of the reasons we wanted you on the show, is because you do so well at Kobo. They are of course our sponsors, and all of your books are available to buy there with that exclusive discount code that we offer as well.
Good stuff.
Whistle comes in every time.
I've got to do that. It's a reflex action now. Whenever I hear that offer going out. But just quickly, I mean, I didn't know this, Rachel. You were releasing, was it like a chapter a week of the Assassin thing? Or it sounds like Dickens, the way he used to write his novels. They used to be published on a weekly basis, chapter by chapter, like the Pickwick Papers or whatever, to readers, and then of course compiled into a book that they could read.
Yeah, well, Dickens is actually a hero of mine, both for I love his writing, but also he was a quite savvy businessman. And the reason he serialised his work was because he had to pay the bloody rent. And,
yes.
He couldn't wait to get that book finished and then get paid. He had to have a recurring income coming in. But there was also, I did a lot of reading about it. There's authors that have done this before, and essentially the 3 books are novella size, and the first 2 parts do end on cliffhangers. I did a lot of research into what the backlash could be like. But there was also part of me reading a lot about modern psychology behind the way we've all got shortened attention spans. We've got a Netflix generation. And there was part of me that thought, what if I can release these books like a Netflix series that people can either get one a week, or they can wait until the end of January and then binge the whole lot. And so it was with that mindset that I brought out the Assassin's 3 books, 1 week after the other. So a novella every week for weeks 2, 3, and 4 in January. And the reception was so good, I bundled them up into a paperback omnibus in April and brought that out for people that preferred paperbacks.
Did people tend to buy them all at the same time at the end of the month, or did they go bit by bit?
What was the mixture? There was a real mixture. It's kind of bizarre now, going back. People are discovering that series now and going, oh, I didn't know this ended on a cliffhanger. And I keep wanting to say, oh, you missed it. It was so cool that there was a real enthusiasm for the way I did it from readers. I got a lot of really good emails, people saying, you're driving me up the wall, but I love this idea that I tune in next week and there's the next episode. You know, the people that were on that journey with me completely got it.
Well, that's that's innovative. I think that's fantastic. That's why my ears pricked up when you mentioned it. I think that's a great way.
Isn't it weird, though, that the people who had to wait, the people who were reading them as they were coming out and had to wait for the next one, didn't mind, but the people who can get the next version, the next instalment now, and therefore don't have to worry about the cliffhanger, are the ones who are worried about it. That's odd, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like, well, there lies human nature.
Well, yes, it does. I mean, and you mentioned...
I had a lot of fun doing it, and if I had time, I would love to do a second series in January, but I just don't think it's possible with everything else that I've got on at the moment.
Well, I think it's a wonderful way to actually present, your stories and your books. And as I say, I didn't know that. One thing I did know about Dickens, I mean, obviously, you know Maidstone, and Dickens didn't live a million miles away from there in Rochester. I mean, after a tough day at the office, he used to work in the Strand with on the papers and whatever. He used to walk home to Kent. Did you know that?
No, I didn't.
Yes, he thought nothing of walking. And people just say, well, you're walking, it's 40 miles or more. And he said, yes, it gives me time to think. And off he went. Do you know? Gosh, no wonder he died at 57. I mean, he was absolutely worn out.
It wasn't his 20s.
Well, Rachel, we could spend all day chewing the fat, but we'll let you go because I know it's quite late there now. Over in Australia.
You've got another 3 books to finish tonight and the packing. So it's been really fantastic talking to you.
It's been lovely chatting with you. Thank you so much for having me.
It's a pleasure, and we'll keep in touch on Twitter as ever, and see you when you arrive over here. But in the meantime, Gone to Ground is out soon. That is Detective K Hunter 6, is it? I think it is.
It is, yes, number 6 already.
With it's already out.
7 waiting in the wings, subject to a successful and happy voyage home.
Well, we seem to be spending quite a lot of time in the Southern Hemisphere, Bob, but unfortunately only virtually.
Yes, alas. But
it
seems that Rachel is coming home. She's coming home. So
she is. We had Van der Simon last week. We had a Nio Marsh special. We spoke to I can't remember the name of the other chap.
Oh, Craig
Sisterson.
Craig Sisterson. How can you forget the mighty Craig Sisterson?
Or the other chap, as he's known.
Well, he's very good. An interesting point of interest is the Nio Marsh Awards finalists have been announced this week. So any listeners who are following that particular strand, look up Nio Marsh and finalists are announced, and that's sounding very exciting. Obviously, Australia and the Southern Hemisphere is alive and well with crime fiction writers, as we've mentioned with Rachel just now. But she's coming back to continue her series of crime adventures in Kent, and so we wish her well, and we'll shortly be welcoming her to our shores.
Well, maybe New Zealand noir will be the new Scandi noir. I mean, the Korean thing never really kicked off, did it? Which we mentioned in, I think, about our 3rd or 4th episode, and we hailed that as the next big thing. That's
well, it'd be a great place to say. Well, I mean, the Lakes, the hugely, fantastically well received series, The Lakes, is a murder mystery, isn't it? That was set in New Zealand, and the backdrop of that country to that particular story was incredibly popular. So maybe we'll venture down there. I'd like to visit a literary festival. Yes. Is that too strong a hint, do you think?
Yeah. Christchurch Noir, if it exists. Can we please have an invitation?
The Antarctic Literary Festival.
Oh, if they pay for travel.
Yes, sponsored by Penguin Books.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Oh,
sorry.
Sorry.
I'm
not sure they would cover travel expenses for that one, though. That might get a little bit expensive.
Yes, you have to go all Shackleton on it.
Well, I did. It reminds me of a few months back. I had an invitation to speak at a literary festival in Minnesota.
Oh, yes.
And I said, yes, that's fine. And they mentioned this fee plus travel expenses. And I said, yeah, okay. I said, just to let you know, I'm in the UK, so travel expenses. I looked at the flights and the costs and the times. I said, travel expenses are likely to be this. And I got a reply back about 3 minutes later saying, no.
Well, that's nice.
But I'm not going to.
Well, I had the same response from Great Yarmouth. So, if there is a lit fest in Great Larkmont, I do apologise.
30 quid for petrol? No. Not worth it for doors.
Not worth it for doors. No. But so here we are. We're at the end of another podcast. Thanks very much to all of you who regularly listen. We do value your time listening to our banter.
And we wonder about your sanity.
Thank goodness our guests are so sane and such a...
Well, on the subject of guests, I should just say, before we dive into what has now become regular Bob's thought for the day, we're going to... I should mention that if you like the sound of Rachel Amphlett's books, and why wouldn't you? She is a superb writer and a wonderful, wonderful lady. Head over to kobo.com, find one of her books, and if you enter the promo code CRIME in capital letters at the checkout, the folk at Kobo will give you 90% off, which is very, very kind and exclusive to Partners in Crime listeners, you lucky, lucky things. Okay, Bob, let's have it.
Odd Ode of the Week. No, it's just a little quote here from Dame Denise Mina, a wonderful crime writer. I just found it. I thought it might be quite interesting. She says, I respond very well to rules. If there are certain parameters, it's much easier to do something really good, especially when readers know what those are. They know what to expect, and then you have to wrong foot them. That is the trick of crime fiction, and readers come to crime and graphic novels wanting to be entertained or disgusted.
Well, that's
Discuss.
So
I think that's she's another wonderful writer. It would be lovely to have her as a guest. Mind you, we should ask first, shouldn't we?
Yes. You can't just kidnap people and bring them into the studio. We found out the hard way that doesn't work.
No, yes. I'm sorry. I was just doing some research on my latest book. They broadcast their podcasts. They kidnap their guests.
On that note, I'm going to go and varnish my shed.
Oh, really? Well, I'm certainly not going to watch you do that.
Partners in Crime was presented by Adam Croft and Robert Dawes and produced by Adam Croft. The theme tune was by the Caesareans. The Partners in Crime logo and imagery were designed by Stuart Beisch. Partners in Crime is sponsored by Kobo, your favourite local bookshop, perfected.